Welcome to Medicine, Motherhood, and Missions, the podcast where real life meets big dreams. I'm Johanna, your host, and every episode will dive into inspiring stories from PAs, doctors, and professionals who are also dreamers and mission-driven changemakers. From the hospital halls to the hearts of our homes, and even into communities across the world, we'll laugh, learn, and uncover the challenges, triumphs, and everything in between as we see life through each other's perspectives. Looking for more joy and balance in your career? Don't miss our free guide, How to Be a Fulfilled Provider, your quick boost of encouragement with tips to help you thrive while juggling all your hats you wear. And if you've got little dreamers at home, check out Little Evie's Big Dreams on Amazon. These stories are meant to spark imagination, courage, and kindness, perfect for bedtime or anytime. Follow along as Evie, a little Sri Lankan girl, brings joy and creativity to her community while daring to dream big. This podcast is also brought to you with love by the Ephraim Foundation International, because empowering children and families in rural Sri Lanka isn't just charity, it's continuing a legacy of hope and creating futures full of possibilities. So grab your cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and get ready for uplifting conversations that will leave you inspired and equipped to make a greater impact. Let's jump in. Welcome back to Medicine, Motherhood, and Missions, the podcast where we have meaningful conversations at the intersection of healing, purpose, and everyday life. I'm your host, Johanna, and today's episode is one that will truly touch your heart, especially if you're a parent, a caregiver, or someone who believes in raising the next generation with compassion and intention. Today, I'm joined by children's book author Christine Devane, an award-winning writer whose love for animals and passion for storytelling have inspired books that help children feel seen, safe, and empowered. From her very first book, Elephant Beach, to her beloved Lola and Sophie series, Christine weaves together themes of empathy, kindness, and courage in such a beautiful and accessible way for young readers. In this conversation, we talk about how teaching children kindness towards animals can shape their character, build empathy, and even influence how they show up in the world. We also dive into her journey from teacher to author, the inspiration behind her stories, and practical ways parents can nurture compassion in their homes. This episode is such a gentle, powerful reminder that the smallest lessons, like how we care for animals, can have the biggest impact on the hearts of our children. Let's dive in. Thank you so much, Christine, for coming on the podcast again. We had you before and we spoke about the power of quiet and Elephant Beach. Now you've put out more books, I think more than two, or tell me where you are on this journey of publishing.
Well, thank you so much for having me back on the show. I had so much fun the first time you were on the show, and I really think that we had a great conversation about shy children, and I feel like it was very meaningful. And since then, I
Yes.
have two books that I've published, and as you spoke of before, they're both about my dogs, Lola and Sophie. So Lola and Sophie never actually met. Lola was my chihuahua that I had when I was younger. She was a very fabulous little dog. She loved her clothes and she was very quiet. She used to just sit, and she lived to be 14. And then when she passed away, I ended up getting Sophie a year later. And Sophie we rescued, and we love Sophie, but she's a little mischievous. So when I was thinking in my head of writing a book, I thought it'd be fun to put the two dogs together, even though they've never met. So I have an ABC book that features the two dogs, and then my latest book is on pet safety.
Yeah. And so tell us a little more about why you wanted to focus on the ABC book and pet safety in particular.
So the ABC book I thought of because of my children. We always read books at night, and they love alphabet books. And I think it's such a great way to teach children literacy skills when they're younger. And for my kids, they like pointing out the letters. Did that just freeze?
It's all right.
Okay, I'm sorry. Do you want me to start over?
You can. Let me just put a marker here. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
The ABC book was something I came up with because of my children. We read books every night together, and ABC books are one of their favorites. And I think that they're important because they teach early literacy skills. And when we're reading the books, they like to point to the letters, especially the letters in their name. And I wanted to write my own ABC book. And when I was doing a lot of the author workshops and the author events,
Mhm.
I saw a lot of people gravitate towards dog books. And I love Sophie. So I thought it would be a great fit. And when I was thinking of the book, I think that Sophie's a good mean character, but I also wanted her to have another character. So that's why I put the two dogs together and I came up with that book. Then the pet safety book was also because of my children. I am constantly reminding them how to be safe with Sophie and just not to squeeze her, make sure they're not feeding her chocolate. And I thought that it was a good lesson for kids out there to learn. And I found that there really aren't a lot of books on pet safety. So I think that it's
Yeah.
something that will hopefully help parents, teachers, and also people at animal shelters and people that work with animals and kids.
Yeah, it is really unique. And I mean, you've had a love for animals since you were a kid because the first book was about elephants, and you talked about in that first episode your love for elephants. And now your two little dogs. And it's really nice how you, as you said, there's not a lot of books out there on pet safety. And I love how you're incorporating this so that, you can teach kids as well as your own kids how to be kind and caring towards animals. I think that's really something that's important to instill because sometimes kids don't grow up with any pets or, they may not understand that kindness and care that you have to take towards an animal versus, other things in life. And as you grow older, I think that compassion stays with the child as they grow older, right? And so but how would you describe learning to care for animals and how that shapes a child's empathy towards people as well?
So, growing up, we always had pets, and my parents taught us empathy towards animals. We had dogs, we had hamsters, we had fish, hermit crabs, everything under the sun. And I can remember my mom teaching us safety around our pets. And as our dog got older, it was important to not pick the dog up in certain things because the dog actually went blind. And my parents
Oh, yeah.
instilled in me a love for animals, and I have 2 brothers. We all love animals. And to me, I think that it starts when you're younger. As you mentioned, it's something that you instill in your children. And my children are growing up loving animals the same as I did. And I think that it's really important because you teach kids kindness towards other kids at school, but there's so many creatures out there, pets, wild animals, and I think that it's really important to teach them compassion towards every creature. And in the book, it teaches them about pets, but it also teaches them things about animals in general and just some simple rules that kids can remember. And I think that if you teach kids empathy towards animals, they'll also have empathy towards people.
Mhm. And just thinking about the environment and nature around us, sometimes those little things that we teach them really kind of help them think about the world we live in and how to care for every creature that we come, you know, into our lives or wherever we walk, environments that we live in, right? And I think that translates to care for nature and those bigger concepts that they can take as they grow older, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Um, 'Cause sometimes we feel like, our kids can have these fears of certain animals, things that, dogs in particular, sometimes a lot of kids are scared of dogs. How can parents navigate situations where a child may be fearful or unsure around animals?
I would tell parents the same thing that I tell parents about shy children. It's just we don't want to push kids. So if a child is really afraid of a dog, I'm not going to bring the child in the same room as Sophie. And I do have friends whose kids are afraid of dogs, and I simply put Sophie in the other room. And I think that you need to teach the child that they don't have to be afraid, but it's a slow process. So you can maybe watch videos of dogs, read about dogs, learn about dogs from afar, and then have them slowly introduced to dogs. So if they're really afraid of
Mhm.
dogs, I would have them watch videos and see, oh, look at there's that dog. That dog's nice. Let's read about dogs. And then maybe one day introduce them to a dog, but do it slowly and say, okay, let's be in the same room as a dog. Or let's work our way towards touching the dog. But I wouldn't just say, they're afraid of dogs. Let's put her right in the same room as Sophie. That's the same thing as being shy. You don't want to push the child because it's going to make them more fearful. And animals can also sense that. So I think in those situations, it's better to really just take time with the child, make the child comfortable, make them realize that they don't need to be afraid and work their way up to maybe petting the dog or sitting with the dog. But it's the same thing as a shy child. It's a slow process. And I think it's something that parents can nurture along the way. And like I said, I do have friends whose kids are afraid of dogs, and I would never put them in a situation where they have to be around Sophie. And Sophie is a small dog, but she does bark. And if somebody's afraid of her, then I can put Sophie in a different room. I don't need to put them together. I don't want to make any
Mhm.
child feel afraid. So just letting kids know
Mhm.
that they're comfortable around pets and that they can work their way into being around a pet as much as they want.
Yeah, that's a really great way of thinking about it, in a respectful way too, towards the child and understanding how they may feel, how, you know, they, kind of acknowledging their fears, acknowledging their emotions and respecting them, but also hopefully slowly teaching them that they don't have to be afraid, but it's okay if they don't want to really interact with the uh, pet that they're afraid of or animal they're afraid of. But, and how and what are some of the simple practical ways parents can begin teaching their children to be gentle and respectful with animals?
So something I do with my kids is if they want to pet an animal and it's a friend's pet, or if we're at a petting zoo or something like that, I guide them. So I'll hold the animal and show them that we're going to pet the animal gently. And I think that there's ways that parents can do that when children are around animals. So always, of course, supervising children with animals and then guiding them and
Mhm.
showing them that the animal is alive. That's one thing that I think is really important for kids to understand. They're not stuffed animals. They're alive. They have
Mhm.
bones. We don't want to squeeze them and hurt them. Just guiding them and showing them how to be gentle with their pets, I think is really important and a great place for people to start out with. I know there's one shelter I've talked to that uses stuffed animals, and they show kids with a stuffed animal how to be appropriate with a dog. So they say, okay, let's practice petting the dog and showing them what not to do, but they do that before they even introduce an animal. So parents could do that too. And as I mentioned before, reading books, and if they want to maybe watch videos showing the animals and showing people how to interact with them. But I think that it's something that parents obviously always need to supervise too. That's something that I stress when kids are with
Yeah.
animals, especially animals they might not
Mhm.
know, just making sure that you're supervising because you never know if a child pulls a tail or something like that. So just making sure that you're
Mhm.
watching that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because my daughter has been asking us, "Can I get a pet?" And, teaching them responsibility is good, and when they do have a pet, they do have to learn a certain level of responsibility that is age appropriate. How do you teach your kids age appropriate responsibility towards the pets they have?
I let my kids have jobs with Sophie that are age
Mhm.
appropriate jobs. It's funny, Sophie loves taking a tub. I've never seen a dog that loves taking a tub. I think it's because they go in the tub. So she lines
Oh,
right up and she loves to go in the tub. So my kids are obsessed with giving Sophie a tub. So that's one of their jobs because I'm standing right there. They all put a little bit of shampoo on her and then they like to each take the towel and
mhm,
dry her off and they try doing the hair dryer. So that's one job that they do. And then another job that they do is checking on her food and water. So if her food and water is
mhm,
empty, then they tell me. And my older son, now he can open, we have a fenced in yard. So if Sophie needs to go out, he can open the door and stand there and let her back in. So I let them do that.
okay.
But one thing that I still don't really let them do is when we go for a walk. I don't necessarily let them
Mhm,
hold the leash just because
uh-huh,
there are a lot of dogs in the neighborhood and
mhm,
there are a lot of children, there are a lot of people, and I want to make sure that I have the leash. So
mhm,
that's something my
yeah,
oldest is still only 6. So that's a job that
mhm,
I still don't give them.
yeah,
But they like checking in on her food and water, letting her out, and definitely the tub thing they like. And then my older son too, he loves to tuck her in. So if she's sitting on the couch, he comes over
mhm,
and brings her little blankets. But it's nice because it teaches them responsibility and it gives them little
mhm.
jobs and they feel accomplished when they get to help out with the dog. Another thing they're not allowed to do, but they try to help with is brushing her teeth because I won't let them do that. But they like to get it ready and put the toothpaste on the brush and then they watch, but they don't really
Yeah,
participate in that yet. So there's jobs for kids to do. It's just figuring out what's appropriate and
mhm.
what's not appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes taking care of a pet is a lot of responsibility. And, it's good that they can see that. And that's another way they can kind of learn those things, teachable moments of responsibility, which will hopefully last. But of course, sometimes, with kids, it's always age appropriate. And of course, understanding that, they're also learning. Tell me a little bit more about how you would intentionally raise children who are both compassionate and responsible, not just with animals, but in life. And what has raising animals taught you about that?
I would go back to how my parents raised me. We always had animals. And I can remember my mom taking me to the vet, and we learned responsibility and compassion. And we just learned how to take care of animals, but also to care about animals. And I can remember there was a pigeon that flew into our front, the front door, and it was just
Mhm,
walking around, and we scooped it up in a box. And my mom read the number on it. He had a number on his leg and the owner came and got him. But she really taught me how to be compassionate towards animals. And I'm trying to do that with my own children and just teaching them to be responsible and also teaching them that they're alive and they have feelings. So sometimes if
mhm,
Sophie needs a break, I say, Sophie needs a little bit of a break. Let's let her go sit down, but it teaches them how to interact with animals, but also how to interact with people. So it's showing them that sometimes people need a break too. And it shows them just that everybody has feelings, animals and people. And I take my kids a lot of places where they do get to interact with animals. We go
mhm.
the town near us just had a petting zoo a couple of weeks ago. They love doing all sorts of animal
Right.
excursions. We go to a lot of farms and things like that. So they're around
Yeah.
animals a lot and they love seeing animals, learning about animals, interacting with
Mhm.
them. And I think that it really shapes who they are because it shaped who I am because of how my parents were when I was younger.
Yeah. And also, just the thought, because we can go to petting zoos and the zoo or different interactive places to help kids kind of see how each animal lives and interacts and what the, things are to care for them. But sometimes, having a pet um, helps them really understand that a pet is not just, that word pet. Sometimes we feel it's limits the real significance of what it is to care for an animal, right? Because it's, another living being that needs care and compassion and so much of us. For some, pets are like their children, and
Yes, I would say Sophie's like one of my kids, and it's funny because they treat her so they like for her to come in the car, and she loves coming in the car. And before we go anywhere, my 2 younger children will say, "Can Sophie come in the car? Can Sophie come in the car?" And then if we can't take her, they'll say, "Oh, Sophie looks sad." So they recognize that she has feelings, even though she's an animal.
Mm,
They recognize that she's bummed out that we're going somewhere and she can't come. And they also like to bring her places. And then we have a birthday party for her every year. And they really do treat her as if she's another member of the family. So I like how you said sometimes the word pet, I think, can put them in a category when they're really more than that. They're a family member. And if Sophie ever doesn't feel good, they all get upset and they want to make sure she's better. So learning to take care of her is like learning to take care of another living thing. And it's funny because there's certain things that you don't think they pick up on, and then they'll say, "Oh, wow, I think Sophie's cold. I think she needs a jacket." Or can she come with us in the car? And, oh, I think she wants to go do this. I think she wants to go do that. So they always try to include her, which is
mhm.
great. And she thinks she's just like them. So it's cute.
Yeah. Yeah, it because this conversation has kind of reminded me of like I recently went to had the opportunity to go to a writers conference, and one of the speakers there was Robin Wall Kilmer. She is a prolific writer on how nature and life and environmentalism and conservation all connect and interchange and intersect. She just brings these, you know, things to life in such a grand but yet simple way. It just makes me think of like how, you know, all around us and how she talks about because she has Native American heritage. And so she talks about how the life giving, just coexistence and the constant give and take with both the nature and the animals and the planet around us, how what we do affects the other and what happens to them affects us. And so, those grander messages of how we take care of our planet, the world we live in, and, how the future will be for our future generations. These are like small little things that will make a bigger impact eventually in their lives as if if they take in these kids take in these aspects of how to care for another being, even though it may not be another human being, but it's part of the environment and world we live in, right? And
Yes,
so I
I would
think
agree
that's
with
kind of
that.
what I feel so beautiful about your books, because it helps us remind us, sometimes we can write books for kids that teach us these, big concepts of caring, love, and kindness, but bringing it into something that's just fun and simple and relatable to them in the form of, caring for a pet is, and pet safety is such a nice little thoughtful way to bring those bigger concepts into a way that they can grow with it. And so, what is one message you hope every child takes away from your books?
I hope that children learn that animals are our friends and that we should be caring and kind towards animals, even if we don't have pets. I think that it's just important for kids to learn that animals are living creatures, they live among us, and we should really be empathetic and caring towards them.
And I have to ask because I think it was not too long ago we did the book 1 and now we're on book 3. What's next for you?
So I have had some people ask me to write a book on a pet adoption, and I think it would be
Oh,
fun to write it from the perspective of the dog because a lot of times people adopt a pet and they don't realize how long it takes for a pet to adjust to a household. And unfortunately, people bring the pet back. And I saw that a lot when I
Mm,
volunteered at the MSPCA. People would take a dog home and it does take a little while for them to adjust and people were not patient and they'd bring the dog back. So I might do a book showing pet adoption through the eyes of the pet, showing how it takes a little while for them to get used to their surroundings. And that's my idea. I'm gonna spend the summer trying to do events that focus on just these books and take a little break and maybe
uh-huh,
work on that in the fall, but that's the general consensus. I think that that will be the next one because I like the Lola and Sophie combination. I think they work
mhm.
really well together because they're
Yeah.
opposites, but they're also dogs, so they're similar.
Mhm.
And I think that it would be nice to show people that rescue dogs are wonderful, but also we need to be patient with them because some rescue dogs have lived in multiple places. Sometimes by the time
Yeah.
they get to the shelter, they've been a few places. I mean, Sophie was found on the street. She ended up in a shelter, and this group took her on a bus from Texas to Rhode Island. So she had a whole history before
Oh,
she
wow.
came to my house. So, of course, she's going to get
Mhm.
to my house and be like, what is this? Where am I? How long am I staying here? And
Yeah.
it can be confusing to them. The book I hope will help people to see how pet adoption's wonderful. We just have to be patient throughout the process.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it, Christine. I love your heart for kids and all the work you're doing writing these meaningful books that will teach kids something positive. Any last words of encouragement or any simple communication techniques that you would love to share with parents out there?
I think that teaching kids how to be safe and kind towards animals is it's very easy. And I think that parents oftentimes don't do it because they think that it's another thing for me to do. But I think that it's something very simple that parents can do. But I also think that it's really important because after I wrote the book, I started doing research and they say that 2 million children are bitten by dogs a year. 1 million are by the family pet. So I think that
Mhm.
parents just really need to try to teach kids how to be safe, but also be realistic about it and know that at the end of the day, they are still our pets. So if we pull their tail or squeeze them or something like that and they react, then that's what happens with animals. So I think that just having parents be realistic about oh, I think we froze. Sorry, I don't know why that froze again.
It's all right. I marked the clip so we can keep going.
So I would just tell parents that pet safety is something simple but very important. And with the statistics on how many children are bitten every year, it's just a really important thing to incorporate in your household. And I've had a lot of people I've met that will tell me, my dog is great with kids, or my kid doesn't need to learn pet safety. And I really think it's something that every parent needs to teach their child because they say too the biggest risks are kids 6 and under, and where they're
Mhm.
lower to the ground, a lot of bites happen in the face, and obviously we don't want that happening. So just to love our pets, but also teach children how to be respectful with animals because it's something that happens all the time, unfortunately, with accidents. And just to really monitor kids, but teach them just to give animals space and to respect them and understand they're alive. I think that it's just really important for parents to teach. And it's simple. Just with Sophie, I can say, oh, Sophie's sitting over there. Let's give her a break. I'm not taking out books or anything like that. I'm just simply saying she needs
Mhm.
a break. Let's give her a break. And so my kids know when she goes in the bed, she needs a break. Or if she's on the couch and she looks like she needs a little space, I'll say, let's give her a little space. So it's something, it's very simple and very easy to
Mhm.
teach children. I just think the parents need to be aware and incorporate it into their lives if they have pets.
Yeah, that's actually the main point, I think, of pet safety as well is that being able to prevent accidents, right? And I'm glad that you brought that up because that is something that is particularly important, especially in that 6 to under age group. Having kids, we know those little ones, if they don't know anything about pets or, interacting, they just go straight for like, pulling and tugging and just, they're pretty rough, even though they're tiny.
Yes, Adeline
Yeah.
is gonna be 3, and she still sometimes will be I mean, Sophie's very good with her, but if she sees
Mm-hmm.
animals and stuff like that, I saw, "Okay, gentle, let's ask before we touch the
Yeah.
dog," and just teaching them how to
Mm-hmm.
be safe. It's just so important, and as
Yeah.
you just said too, the 6 and under range, it's really important, but you also just have to monitor them, but it's not something hard
Mm-hmm.
for parents to teach, just incorporate it and just try
Yeah.
to teach it along the way.
Do you have any, or have you heard of any, like, I know they have training dogs, but for families, I know you did mention at the pet adoption place, they have some little interactive teachings that they do before, but that may not be in every place. But have you heard of any other like trainings that, for families or something like that, that are there to help both the families that have new pets or with kids or anything like that?
The places that I've heard of doing it the most are the animal shelters and the
Mhm,
MSPCA near me. I did a story time there, and they have a great program where they do a story time and then they bring an animal in, and all the kids practice petting the animal. And they obviously pick an animal that's very kid friendly. And it
mhm,
shows all the children how to interact with pets. And there's another shelter near me that I know goes out and teaches kids, and they have a program where they go into
mhm.
schools and they teach kids. So I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's something that a lot of animal shelters teach, and I'm not sure if maybe some vets teach it, but there's different programs if you look into it that you could probably bring small children to show them
Mhm.
how to interact with animals.
Yeah, because sometimes, we may not even, even if we are thinking about getting a pet, but we don't have a pet yet, for families like that, but they want to teach their kids something. Can they like call these animal shelters up or, just go in and be a part of those lessons? Is it possible to just reach out or is it only if you're um, actually going to buy and adopt a pet?
I'm pretty sure that everybody can go, though MSPCA, the
Mhm,
storytime event that I did, it was open to the public. So a lot of those kids didn't have pets, and they went in and we
mhm,
read a book and they pet the animals. And it's not something that you have to have a pet to do. So I think it depends on the shelter, but most shelters have kid-friendly activities, and they
mhm,
have groups where you can go in and learn about animals. This event was small kids. I think it was mostly kids 5 and under because it was during the day when most other kids at school. So they had a really
mhm,
young group there and they sang songs. It was actually very cute. They sang songs and they did all sorts of things learning about animals, and
mhm.
some of them have pets and some of them didn't. So it was a great program. And I think that if people wanted to look for something for that, I'm sure that the
Mhm,
shelters would let them, even if they're not getting a pet. I think that the
mhm.
shelters are just trying to do more outreach and teach children about pets.
Well, that's good to know. And that's like a great resource for kids to learn more about animals and safety. So, if you are looking for something like that, reach out to your local animal shelter, I suppose, and you can hopefully find some activities for your kids. But thank you again, Christine. I really enjoyed this podcast. I'm so excited to see what you have in the future as always. And thank you again for this good topic for parents out there, especially us with the little ones and all these things that we're trying to teach our kids. So, what a beautiful and meaningful conversation. Christine's heart for children and animals is such a powerful reminder that kindness is something we can intentionally teach, model, and multiply in our homes and communities. The way we guide our children to care for animals often becomes a foundation for how they learn to care for people, and that's a legacy that truly matters. If this episode encouraged you, I would love for you to share it with a friend, a fellow parent, or anyone who is passionate about raising compassionate, kind-hearted children. And as always, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with us over on social media so we can continue this conversation beyond the podcast. Thank you for being here, for the work you're doing in your homes, your careers, and your communities, and for choosing to live out medicine, motherhood, and missions in your own unique way. I'll see you next episode. Keep sparking hope wherever you are. And in the show notes, I'll have all the books and links that Christine will want to share so that you can find it and read to your kids too.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for joining us in this episode of Medicine, Motherhood, and Missions. We hope you found inspiration, insight, and a sense of connection in the stories we shared today. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners like you. Follow us on Instagram for updates, free downloads, and join a community of like-minded individuals passionate about making a difference through medicine, motherhood, and mission work. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. Until next time, keep sparking hope, keep healing, keep nurturing, and keep making a difference. This is Johanna signing off from Medicine, Motherhood, and Missions. The medical opinions expressed on this podcast are for informational purposes only and should not be considered as medical advice. Always consult a licensed healthcare provider for personal medical concerns or questions. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect